Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is I, Luke Nukem, back here once again, and as you can probably see, I'm in a splint cast, and it's mostly because I've injured my hand while on a scooter. Yeah, it's not one of the best days I had. And I just want to come across to you guys with a huge announcement at the beginning of the video before I get into the review of Captain Marvel. As you can probably tell from my channel, I haven't been posting a whole lot of reviews nowadays. And don't get me wrong, I got some of the few highlights like Glass, Alita Battle Angel, heck, How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World. But at the same time, you're still wondering, where's Replicas? Where's Lego Movie 2, the second part? Where's The Upside? Where's Escape Room? Where's Cold Pursuit? Hell, where's Medea Family Funeral? Well, I would have to say that the fact of the matter is that in all honesty, 2018 all the way to early 2019, which is basically where we're in right now, has pretty much been the most stressful year I have ever dealt with in my lifetime. I have been honestly trying so hard to make more reviews for you guys, but at the same time, I have to still balance things like university, like going to college, working at a job. And not only that, but I have to deal with multiple events like me moving from a certain apartment after the flooding all the way to a different apartment, attending and meeting certain deadlines in my journalism classes, as well as trying to attend early moving screenings. The point is, no, this channel is not dead. I will continue making more reviews for you guys, so be on the lookout for more reviews this March and in April. As for next week, you will see reviews like Captive State, Us, which I just saw at South by Southwest, the live-action remake of Disney's Dumbo, and so much more to come. So overall, while I'm still dealing with multiple hardships like going to school, working at a job, I will still continue making more reviews for you guys, and I can guarantee you there will be more down the line. So without further delay, let's finally get down to business as we talk about the latest movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe known as Captain Marvel. Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you today by offering this entirely obvious query to you all. Don't you just hate it when Hollywood forces down very obvious political and social justice messages down your throat? Now, let's provide context here. I'm not talking about the movies that do it exceptionally well, like for example, Steven Spielberg biopics like Schindler's List, Bridge of Spies, or science fiction movies that happen to be one of my favorite movies of all time, District 9 and Children of Men. I'm talking about movies like the female Ghostbusters remake, The Last Jedi, and yes, the Purge movies that think that they are so triumphant and believe that whatever they're doing is so progressive, so brave, so revolutionary, when in actuality the social justice messages along with the film's writing and the story ruin any kind of goodwill the movie may have going for it. And for this year's first superhero film, Captain Marvel, it is also carrying that same word of mouth, particularly towards Marvel and the main lead actress of the movie, Brie Larson's feminist agenda towards the film. And it turns out that due to their politics, the film, before it even came out, has been recently lambasted by multiple negative audience reviews downvoting the film on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, here's the thing. I really like Brie Larson. I think she does an extremely good job with the material that she's been given, like movies like 21 Jump Street, Scott Pilgrim, or even with Oscar-nominated movies like Room. And regardless of the film's controversial word of mouth that is being passed around the internet, I just want to say that I am still wanting to see a movie and to make sure if it's worth watching or not. But I gotta say that even with the controversy flooding this movie, on its own terms as a film, Captain Marvel is just a vapidly forgettable superhero movie. It's a film that takes itself seriously without taking any kind of chances that would have made the movie watching experience worthwhile, and could be a potential sign of Marvel's fatigue of creating new and interesting stories. Okay, so the basic premise is that there is this ongoing war between two extraterrestrial civilizations, the Kree and the Skrulls. The Kree, which are basically space guardians who are entrusted in protecting their capital planet of Hala, some of whom are being played by Jude Law and Digimon Hansu, and the Skrulls, who are shape-shifting aliens led by the main Skrull Talos, played by villain acting extraordinaire Ben Mendelsohn. The main protagonist being caught in the middle of all of this is Brie Larson as Carol Danvers, who is assigned as a Kree warrior with no recollection of her past. However, after a mission goes horribly wrong, she crash lands on Earth, whereas she meets familiar faces like Samuel L. Jackson as a young younger Nick Fury to help her on her journey. But once Carol eventually discovers what kind of person she actually is, it is up for her to pick a side and to end the war. Let's start out things simple in a positive manner by talking about the performances and the characters. There are a fair share of performances that do a very decent job in their roles and the material they're being given, like Jude Law, Digimon Hansu, and even Samuel L. Jackson, who takes on an interesting turn as the younger Nick Fury. But perhaps what is possibly my favorite role of the whole movie would have to be Ben Mendelsohn. Not only because Ben Mendelsohn is such a great actor, but because his character was probably the only character in this whole movie I got invested in. At first, he starts off being yet another throwaway villain added to Marvel's collection of forgettable movie villains. He starts off cartoonishly sinister, and he has a plan that is just all around weak. But as the film progresses, his motivation becomes well realized and justified, and his character becomes someone who is acting out of desperation to do right for his people. It's a unique and interesting turn for a certain Marvel villain to have. However, your villains are only as great as your heroes, which in this case will bring shocking volumes to your attention because, unfortunately, the weakest actor of the whole movie is Brie Larson. Now, once again, as I stated before, I like Brie Larson. I think she is a very talented actress. I mean, she has an Oscar to prove it, for Christ's sake. But here's the thing I would like to say about Brie Larson's performance as Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel. Her performance is like a light switch. When she's acting very cocky, adventurous, entertaining, enthusiastic, and even charismatic, while also sharing banter back and forth with a younger Nick Fury, she delivers a very decent performance. However, when she's trying to act serious, it is very hard to be convinced by her. And as a result, her performance and her character are about as wooden as, well, a piece of wood. And surprisingly enough, there isn't a whole lot of humor to be had in this movie, and when it does provide some humor, it's mostly just bland, formulated comedy relief. Like, for example, the banter between Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson do a fair job at being at least entertaining, if nothing else. But then as the movie continues, they introduce this cat. And as much as I love cats, it really just feels like the directors virtually intended on making that cat basically the comedy relief. Like, it really didn't feel like a character, it more or less felt like a comedy relief machine. Now, seeing how this is owned by Disney, and yes, it is a superhero movie, the visual effects in this movie are very well crafted in certain scenes. Where they do shine is just establishing a world and designing bits and pieces of the galaxy. When they're showing models of the spaceships, where they're showing the terrain and the galaxies and the environment of the entire planets. They look incredibly neat. Captain Marvel's powers whenever she's glowing into like her ultimate Super Saiyan or whatever form. It does look relatively decent, but what I do have to say is that the best part about the entire CGI would have to be the de-aging CGI makeup. Speaking of a younger Nick Fury, the de-aging CGI makeup is so up to par and well composited that it actually makes yourself go, wow, I've never seen that kind of visual effect before. I mean, sure, it absolutely looks way better than Jeff Bridges in Tron Legacy, but your overall craft in making me believe that I am watching a younger Nick Fury? Not bad. However, the CGI department doesn't get away that easily, because there is an abundance of poorly composited green screen and visual effects. For example, there was a scene where the camera is pointing at the main character and she's falling down to what can possibly presume to be her death. Like the good bits of 90s nostalgia, some of the very cool, unique visual effects, and some of the action sequences, which can certainly bring some audiences at least attention, and it looks outrageously and clearly fake. Also, there are other poorly done CGI moments. Like, for example, there was a spaceship crash that looked like something out of San Andreas. You know that Dwayne Johnson movie that came out 4 years ago? Whenever you basically had that car that was basically going like this, dun, 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 like, you know, a pair of dice or something. It doesn't look as bad as, like, say, the Fifth Wave airplane crash, but it still just looks poorly made. And like the visual effects, there are some pleasing action in this movie at points. And I'm not talking about the action scenes as a whole. I'm talking about the effort that goes into the choreography, the movements, and how the fights are fairly well constructed to make you feel at some points entertained. The reason why I pointed out not the entire action scenes as a whole is because, shockingly enough, the action scenes are utterly forgettable. There is no action sequence in this whole movie that made me go, wow, I really kind of like that action scene. I'm gonna remember it in years on end. At least with how cheesy, and I cannot believe I'm saying this despite how incredibly overrated this movie is, at at least with how cheesy the No Man's Land sequence in Wonder Woman was, it was at least something that audiences, especially the younger demographic, felt inspired by. I cannot believe I just said that. And the biggest example of the action scene's downfall would have to apply to the editing. The editing of some of the fight sequences at segments feel fairly sporadic and choppy, but it doesn't necessarily happen all the time, but sometimes when it does, it is fairly distracting. For example, there was a training sequence between Jude Law and Brie Larson. Sometimes when the film has the decency to film an actual good shot, you would get a wide and perfectly good shot in where they're fighting at, but when they're fighting in close quarter combat, it feels awfully sporadic and jumpy and all over the place. Another example is this fight sequence that basically takes place in like this dark, misty planet, and it's basically an ambush sequence between the Skrulls and the Krees. And I couldn't tell who was who. It was basically hard for me to tell what was even going on, that it makes it hard to register during the action sequences. For example, there is this twist in the movie that, of course, I'm not going to give away. There is this huge twist that basically happens with one of the characters, and then later on in the next scene, it basically shows like this big reveal. And when I saw that, I became basically confused at that point. I'm like, was that supposed to be the twist? Or was it just staged poorly? Because once you reveal something way too early, it is going to lose the suspense that the audience is going to have towards the movie, and it's basically going to go like, okay, well, I already knew that was coming. I think what could have made that pivotal moment of the movie work is if the scenes were rearranged. Just first add the big shocking reveal, and then later on, you can add a few bits of information behind the twist. It could have absolutely worked. Instead, what we got in the final product is just disappointing in every single aspect. And the movie itself just looks bland. There's no visually appealing saturation, there's no eye-gasmic cinematography. There was nothing that caught the audience's attention the entire time. And just for a quick second, I gotta talk about this thing. You know how in Solo: A Star Wars Story, where you have that scene where Han Solo basically confronts an Imperial officer, and he basically gets his name Han Solo, where you're like, oh, that's how we got that. There are scenes that are basically kind of similar to that, and that is really when Captain Marvel's swan dies over the shark. There is a thing that happens towards the end of the movie, and you're like, that's how we got that thing? So we're supposed to believe that it was so awesome and so cool looking, and that's how we got it. Thank you, Disney and Marvel, for subverting my expectations. It was basically the second dumbest thing I have seen in any Marvel movie since Black Panther's "What are those?" joke. Overall, guys, Captain Marvel is not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it doesn't really strive to be the best possible superhero movie that it wants to be. While the acting for the most part is fairly good, and there are some moments of entertainment value to be had, Captain Marvel just suffers for being completely unremarkable. The by-the-numbers story, the unfunny humor, the bland cinematography and janky editing, some uneven bits of CGI and action scenes, as well as a handful of scenes that make your eyes go completely wide, and not in a good way. That, or because I'm a white male. In summation, shockingly enough, Captain Marvel for me gets a 2 out of 5. Alright guys, so that is my review of Captain Marvel. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and also Xbox if you're in the gaming mood. Yeah, I can't move my thumb. And also, if you would like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.